To the cloud. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. I'm Jarrett from the Netter Center. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you all for your awesome work this semester. And I'm going to pass the mic to my amazing colleague at Bon Appetit Management Company, Jabbar, to introduce our panelists in this session.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jared. Appreciate the introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jabbar Jeffrey Zell. I'm the Director of Operations for Cafe Bon Appetit. We are your food service provider. Today's meeting, what we like to call our nutrition workshop Q&A. This came about with our strong partnership with Jared and the Netter Center. And what we basically want to do today is open the floor up and really give you the tools and the nuggets and all the tips that you may need to when you're going into these high schools and going into these middle schools, talking to these students about the nutritional values in food, eating healthy, sustainability, all those different things that come about when I know that the Netter Center is partnering with these different communities that they reach out to. So we brought in the pros, we brought in the experts to come in here and pretty much answer questions and be able to educate you all and give you all the tools and definitely answer as many questions as we have. There's no question that is a bad question today, so please feel free. I'm going to pass it on to Dan Connolly to do an introduction himself, and we have our panelists of teams that will be speaking today.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Jabbar. So you'll see. There. Thank you very much. Yeah. So that's me, Dan Connolly. I'm the wellness manager for Bon Appetit Management Company, Penn's food service provider, as Jabbar said. So my role kind of basically falls into three main buckets here on campus. So I support students with special dietary needs, whether that's a food allergy, some type of religious diet, things like that, really kind of supporting them. Training and collaborating with our chefs and managers on all things wellness, and then partnering with the larger Penn community on wellness initiatives such as this one. I've been a registered dietitian nutritionist for almost 8 years, and I've been working with Bon Appetit for a little over 11 years now.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you today. So my name is Mara Saltiri. I'm also a registered dietitian, and I am the UACS Nutrition Systems and Education Manager with the Netter Center. A little bit about my background. Since a young age, I've found growing and cooking food to be therapeutic. It's a form of self-expression, a form of love, a natural way to connect with others. And that's what inspired me to get a degree in nutrition and dietetics at the University of Pittsburgh, and then complete a graduate program with Cal Poly, the California Polytechnic State University. And since then, I've been working with urban agriculture and nutrition nonprofits, both on the East and the West Coast, regarding advocating for sustainable food systems, compassionate approaches to nutrition education. I feel very passionately that all communities should have access to good quality, culturally appropriate, affordable food. One of my greatest joys is connecting with people over the love of food, growing and learning with them, and supporting people all ages to use food and nature as tools to nourish the mind, body, and soul. So I'm not sure if you asked for my whole background, but there it is, very passionate, and that's why I'm so excited to be connecting with you today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ariella, and I am a first-year medical student at the med school. Really excited to be here and with such amazing panelists. I come from a biology and medical background. I took a couple gap years, and during that time, I did a lot of work in food outreach and farming. And especially with Latino communities in the US. I'm really passionate about food access and food equity as it relates to health. And I'm also the coordinator of our culinary medicine curriculum for first years, which basically combines hands-on kitchen learning with nutrition information into our medical school curriculum, which we severely lack. So I'm really passionate about teaching medical students more about nutrition, learning more about nutrition myself, and making sure everyone has access to healthy, affordable, and culturally appropriate food, as Marie said. So I'm really excited to be here with you all. So I'm actually going to start us off today talking a little bit about why nutrition is important. If you're here, I'm sure it's important to you too. And this is going to come from my own bias as a medical student, which is the first most important thing is that poor diet causes more deaths than any other risk factor that we could possibly think about, which is wild because it is so preventable. And we as doctors and you as students have so much power in kind of making changes and talking about food and learning about food to prevent a lot of these unnecessary deaths via nutritional changes. Next slide. There are mounds and mounds and mounds and mounds of evidence about the benefits of a healthy diet. It can be anything from like kind of the obvious things that you would think about. I think there's someone unmuted. Does everyone mind muting? Awesome, thank you so much. So a healthy diet is associated with kind of the obvious things, right? We're saying longer lifespans, reduced risk of heart disease, diabetes, but it's also preventative for things like cancer, improved mental health, improved mood. There have been studies showing that a healthy diet can reduce depressive symptoms. It can help with healthful aging so that as people get older, they're not having cognitive declines or serious chronic disease, better physical and mental function overall, decreased risk of frailty in elderly populations. The list goes on and on and on. And it's important not only for longevity, but also improving quality of life for people of all ages, which is pretty awesome and an incredibly useful tool that I hope we can take advantage of more. Next slide, please. And you know, we happen to live in a country where a lot of people don't have access to healthy and affordable food. There are these concepts called food deserts, which are kind of areas of the country where there isn't kind of a robust grocery store with access to fresh produce. A lot of these stores end up having like tiny convenience stores where there's a lot of like processed food that ends up actually being even more expensive. So people who can't afford to buy healthy food are already kind of being pushed to the limit by being forced to buy unhealthy foods at an even higher cost. And so this is kind of why the work you all are doing is so important by bringing healthy options to students in schools, and also giving people the opportunity to learn about kind of what even healthy choices look like, to kind of work against the system that's really, really working against us. Next slide. And you know, me, my bias as a medical student, we've already talked about all of the amazing benefits, health benefits, and preventive benefits of healthy eating, but very few medical schools provide nutrition education, only 25 hours of it. And fewer than 1 in 6 physicians feel highly confident about their ability to discuss nutrition with patients. So really, like, the key to solving this problem, I hope in the future, right, is bringing this more into the medical field, but it starts with you all and the work that you are doing in communities and at schools. And that is the place where you can really, really make a difference, because our doctors aren't doing it right now for us. So thank you all so much for the work that you're doing and for being here. And I'm going to pass it off to Dan and Maurice.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'd like to just kind of start in talking a little bit about my philosophy, a little bit about eating and healthy food items in general. So on my slide where I introduced myself, I had this phrase that we use in Bon Appetit a lot, and it's to create food that is alive with flavor and nutrition, right? And so To me, it doesn't really matter how nutrient dense a food item is or how healthy the food item is. If it doesn't taste good, people aren't going to eat it, right? And so that's not improving anyone's health, because it's just going to sit on the shelf or sit in the cafe for us, right? So when developing recipes or working with our chefs, or what you guys will be doing, kind of working with the students, we want to focus on leveraging some healthy flavor drivers. So I always look to herbs, spices, and acids as kind of those flavor drivers, ways to impact a dish without really impacting the nutrition facts panel, so to speak, right? And then what we'll use kind of as our secondary thing, or use sparingly, is those sugar, salt, and fats, which are typically traditionally used to flavor foods. But we know that, as Ariel just mentioned, those are those drivers behind some of those disease conditions. So using those sparingly, like I said. So that's a little bit about kind of my philosophy in food and wellness in general. But we got some great questions from the group ahead of time that I wanted to kind of touch on, and then I'll pass it off to Maris. So we got a lot of cool questions about smoothies. So I think I'm going to start there for a little bit. I'll talk about smoothies. So you'll see here, one of the questions we got was, what's like the best smoothie liquid base? And I'll say, for me, generally I use oat milk, but any milk will really do, right? I think we think about soy milk, we think about cow's milk, whichever you prefer, I think is a good base there. I think it's a little bit of a personal taste preference. We also may have to think about, when suggesting to the students or clients or guests or whoever you're working with, is some dietary considerations, right? If someone's allergic to cow's milk, they might, prefer soy milk, obviously, or an oat milk, or if someone's allergic to soy, kind of have to think through that. But they all work pretty well. I would just take a quick look at anyone that has added sugars, like an added flavored soy milk or oat milk that has added sugars, or looking to use a reduced fat cow's milk if you're using cow's milk. But other than that, anyone really works well. So that's good there. And the next question I had was around adding nuts and seeds to smoothies, and it was a really good question, kind of focused on those good fats. How do we add some good fats into the smoothies, or eating? And it's a positive thing to have those in the smoothie, because it'll kind of help us feel fuller longer, having that kind of more robust meal. And they can add great flavor and texture to the smoothie. So definitely something you can add there. One thing you'd want to be aware of, that they are pretty calorie dense food items normally, like the peanut butters, avocado, things like that are pretty calorie dense. And sometimes it can be easy to unknowingly consume a lot of calories when drinking your calories versus eating a meal. So that's just something to be mindful of. I think we just be mindful of your body's hunger cues and kind of listen to that when consuming those types of things. The next question around smoothies that I got was around frozen or fresh. And frozen fruit can actually be a really great solution to smoothies. If you purchase the frozen fruit in the store, they're often frozen quickly right after being picked, so it actually may preserve some of the nutrients. And it actually works really well with smoothies. It kind of keeps the food cold while it's kind of in the blender, which if you've ever made smoothies, sometimes they get really watery and loose once it gets kind of warm. So having frozen fruit could positively impact that final product. And frozen fruit will last, obviously, it's frozen, so it'll last in your freezer for a really long time. So we can kind of enjoy some of those summer fruits in the winter that might be hard to get fresh. And from a nutritional standpoint, again, it's pretty similar. After about a year, there might be some nutrition loss in the frozen product, but hopefully we're eating smoothies, enjoying them within that year timeframe. Next question was around added sugars to smoothies. And I'll spend a good amount of time on here because I think this is a little bit more of the ratio and the recipe kind of driver of a smoothie. Generally speaking, I think the best tasting smoothies combine our base liquid, with some sweet fruits and a key ingredient, a little acid. So remembering one of those flavor drivers I talked about earlier, having some acid in that smoothie will really brighten up the flavor, kind of bring it to life. And when I talk about acid, I'm talking about like things like lime, lemon, pineapple, strawberries, things like that. Fruits that have a little acidity to them, again, will really kind of brighten up that smoothie without needing any added sugar. So in those types of smoothies, I don't really think we'll ever have to add sugar to it. I'm sure there'll be plenty sweet and delicious on their own. Probably what could be the general kind of combination of the ratio of ingredients I typically use is about a quarter cup of liquid per 1 cup of solid ingredients. So again, if we're making that smoothie with our liquid base, 1 or 2 sweet fruits at about a cup, and then a little bit of acid to kind of bring it all together and brighten it up and make it a great, delicious fruit smoothie. It's probably where if we tried to start doing a fruit and vegetable smoothie is where people are probably thinking some added sugar might be needed. But what I typically have done is try to figure out my personal taste preference for whatever fruit veggie combo I'm doing. So I'll start with that ratio again of a quarter cup liquid, cup solid ingredients. And I'll break down that 1 cup of solid ingredients into 1 part vegetable, 7 parts fruit, right? That'll get me kind of a base that'll probably be pretty sweet still because there's only a teeny tiny bit of vegetable in that first one. And then what I'll do, this is like a fun kitchen experiment I like to do. So I'll start slowly adding more vegetable, like take that ratio from 2 parts vegetable, 6 parts fruit, and then move up 3 parts vegetable, 5 parts fruit, etc., until I find my personal sweet spot. And if we do that, we're slowly sneaking in more and more vegetables, but still having a flavor profile and a texture and all those things that are enjoyable to me. And so you can, once you find that sweet spot, you can kind of just stick there and knowing that I'm getting a good amount of vegetables kind of in that smoothie. But you got to circle back on this because tastes change over time. And so every once in a while you up the amount of veggies and see, is it still good to me? If it's good, and look, you just added some more veggies to it. Awesome. And if doing it this way allows you to have those vegetables and the fruit and not adding any of those kind of just pure sugar options, I think that's a great way to go about that. Plus it could be fun having doing some experimenting in the kitchen there. So that was smoothies. I'm sure in the Q&A at the end, if we get more questions, I can touch more on that. But we got another great question around afternoon snacks, and everybody's going to be different, right? But some things that I've personally seen people enjoy in the past. I got to plug the smoothies again since we just talked about that. Obviously, it's a great option. Other general ones are, simple things like hand fruit, like apples, oranges, or bananas are great and easy to, if you have them in the house. I think we have to be mindful that they do go bad quickly. So just, being mindful of that. An old classic, celery and carrot sticks with peanut butter or hummus. Those are great things that kind of be in the refrigerator already queued up for people. Another good one was overnight oats. It's a nice meal prepping kind of solution that can be done 3 to 4 days in advance. It just gets held in the refrigerator. And there's unlimited topping options when it comes to overnight oats. So you can kind of customize it to your liking. And that kind of transitions us nicely into the next question I got. A few questions around meal prepping. The question more specifically was like, what's the best way to meal prep to ensure the food doesn't go bad? So for me, I'm thinking my food service hat gets put on real quickly here around food safety. So time and temperature are those critical control points when we talk about food safety. So we talk about a danger zone for food, which is between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, generally speaking. In this danger zone, food should not be left out in this danger zone for more than 2 hours. Unfortunately, if it has, we definitely got to recommend throwing it away. I hate the idea of food waste, but getting people sick is even worse. So that's something we always have to think about. Again, the danger zone is 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 2-hour max. So the most common mistakes I see or hear from people about food prepping and getting things together like that is improper cooling of the food after it's cooked. We want leftovers to be placed in shallow containers for quick cooling and refrigerated at 40 degrees or below as soon as possible. Again, always within that 2-hour window. At home, I'm often cooking for two, so I tend to try to store 2 extra portions of each of the individual components of the meal in their own containers, again, for quick cooling. So to kind of walk through and give an example of that, this past Sunday, I made some jerk chicken with lemon farro and a roasted cauliflower and red bell peppers. So I was, like I said, I was meal prepping, so I made 2 extra portions of all 3 components. And I used 3 different storage containers. 1 storage container for the chicken, 1 storage container for the lemon farro, and 1 storage container for the cauliflower and red peppers. This allowed me to quickly transfer the leftovers to their own containers as I was plating up my own meal for the night, and quickly transfer those 3 containers into the refrigerator. So what we're thinking about here is if I put all that food into 1 large container, that large volume of food, the center of it would take much longer to cool down than the rest of the food, even if it was in the refrigerator. That's the center of the food could remain in the danger zone for over 2 hours, which would then breed bacteria and whatnot in the center of that food. So again, the key piece is proper cooling, kind of limit the volume of the individual food components and get it in the fridge as quickly as possible. And this allows for easy reheating normally too, and allows you potentially to kind of mix and match, right? I could have that chicken one night with something else and then have the farro a different night, stuff like that. And then reheating is not as common as a mistake, but it is a critical piece of this, obviously with the time and temperature. We need to make sure that we're reheating food to an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, or into a kind of hot and steaming. So those are kind of the key safety pieces when it comes to food prep and making sure the food doesn't go bad. And we always look to the 3 to 4 day window for leftovers is kind of a general safe window. There's great resources on the FDA's website if you want to try to get more specific into those things. They have different days for different types of foods, but 3 to 4 days is a pretty safe bet there. All right, thank you. Next slide.
All right, so I'll be talking to you about nutrition education, specifically with the childhood age. And I like to start off all of my nutrition ed classes with a warm-up activity and thought, why not do that with you all? You know, learn by doing. So one of the magical elements of food is that it's often entwined with memories and nostalgia. So for the warm-up, I would like for you all to close your eyes and think of a favorite food memory. What made that memory special? And when you're ready, I would love for you to share these memories in the chat. A way to think about what food to pick, I usually go through the 5 senses. Maybe it's the sweet flavor of fresh mangoes, the smell of a backyard barbecue. And you can unmute yourself or add in the chat. You might be wondering why there's cherries on the page, and it's because that's my favorite food memory of I grew up with a cherry tree in my backyard, and I remember picking cherries with my pop-pop, and we'd always make pie. And whenever I see cherries, I think of him. It's a very sweet memory. Oh, we have some really great responses. Going to Disney World, and we went to a place for dinner that was the dessert only buffet. That's insane. That sounds like paradise. Being young, Grace shared that in the summer, my mom always had rhubarb dump cake with rhubarb that's grown in our backyard. Rhubarb's a very interesting produce. I don't hear a lot of people utilizing it, so that's really cool. Grandmother cooking congee, making dumplings with my extended family during Chinese New Year, eating big mandarin oranges and blueberries with my family over the summer when it's hot. That's really good imagery right there. I could just picture eating it. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, keep thinking of those ideas. And that segues perfectly into my first point with nutrition education, which is that food is so much more than nutrition. I know I'm talking about nutrition education, so it's a little ironic for me to say that nutrition shouldn't be like the only focus, but it's true. Food is more than nutrients. It's tradition, it's celebration, family, comfort, identity, community, and so on. And it's a powerful tool for connection. So if we just talk about the nutrition facts, we're removing that special thread that weaves us all together. And when leading nutrition education sessions, don't just talk about the nutrition facts. Encourage sharing of memories, storytelling, preferences, honor those preferences. When I have a super quiet class and I ask what they like to eat and I get crickets, I sometimes start off with, okay, what don't you like? And I know we shouldn't always be talking about like what we don't like, but you know, it's important to hear people, to encourage conversation, get the conversation going, and it's okay not to like every food. I don't like every food either. Messages will be remembered when presented in a context that's important to kids. Telling a third grader that they eat too much sodium and they'll get heart disease because of it, that's not what's on a third grader's mind, and that's honestly inappropriate. If you're teaching third grade, it's important to think like a third grader. Ask them what they're interested in. Let them direct the conversation to give you the context of how you should present nutrition information. Teaching isn't just about talking, it's about listening too. So that dives into the first really great question that we got, which is, how do you address healthy lifestyles when speaking to students without having them verge into diet culture? It's a tricky balance. How do we talk about healthy diets without the diet part? I encourage you to focus on positive connections. Messaging should emphasize enjoyment and exploration, not guilt and shame. So words to watch out for: the good, bad, guilt-free, naughty, right or wrong way of eating. Words to include are energizing, mood boosting, delicious, satisfying, nourishing, words that bring joy. And another point that I like to make is to emphasize balance and variety. All foods can fit in a healthy diet. How can we add nutrition to our meals, not subtract? I would never tell someone that they can't eat their grandma's mac and cheese because it's high in saturated fat. Can you imagine doing that? I would be booed out of the classroom, and honestly, for good reason. It's all about balance. So I have a little practice question right here that I'll read to you, and I would love for you to respond in the chat. Jenna is a nutrition educator that's leading a fruit and vegetable lesson to third grade class. She asked the class, what are their favorite fruits? A student raises their hand and shares that they love fried plantains. Jenna responds by saying fried food is bad and she should avoid eating fried plantains and should switch to eating raw bananas. What did Jenna do wrong here, and what would you do differently? You can unmute yourself too. Either option is great. I know it can be hard to like type the full response. I see that there's multiple, when I read this question, like multiple concerns. One is disrespecting someone's culture. Fried plantains is a very special food, and switching it to bananas, that might not make sense in that household. And it's really important not to demonize foods in the classroom, because how would that student feel otherwise? It was really great that they shared, and we should encourage sharing of all forms. So I want to be sensitive of time, so I'm gonna move on, but if you're typing your response, keep doing it and please contribute. I see. My abuela's fried plantains were one of my favorite foods growing up and still are. I'd be devastated if someone told me I couldn't eat them. Exactly, Ariella. It's removing the joy of food, and wiping out culture as well, which we do not want to do. So the next question I got is, what general ideas about nutrition should we promote when designing worksheets, lessons, and other instructional materials? There's a lot of points that I want to make with this slide. It was hard for me to narrow it down to just a few. But one of the things when I focus on when generating nutrition education materials is to involve students in the decision-making process and catering materials that allow for that. For example, I know many of you are going to be making smoothies with kids. Let them decide what goes in the smoothies. Have them vote on their favorite flavor combination. Have them come up with a marketing logo. Kids are so creative, and we want to highlight that. I also like to emphasize hands-on learning. Let's make these lessons fun and engaging. Nutrition is fun, cooking is fun. The learn by doing approach, like I mentioned before, is effective for kids and adults. It's excellent for problem solving and critical thinking. No one wants a long lecture. Adults and kids, to be honest. And exploring 5 senses using various learning styles. Infusing the 5 senses in my lessons is a go-to with elementary kids. Let's talk about carrots. When you bite into a carrot, what sound does it make? Are carrots soft or crunchy? What animals eat carrots? It's really fun to use imagination. Have kids act like they're rabbits eating carrots. It's goofy, it's silly, it's fun. And you'll notice you're smiling and they're smiling, and that's what we want here. And I also included a picture of one of the sensory activities I like to do, which is the mystery box. So basically I have a cardboard box and I cut a hole in it and I put a fruit or vegetable in it, and I have kids feel around and they have to guess what fruit or vegetables in it, and every kid wants to put their hand in the box multiple times. And it's a really great way to tie in different learning objectives like descriptive words and various ways to explore food. And my last point is know your audience. Know your audience, know your audience, know your audience. Consider literacy level, age, culture, food access. These are essential points. It's critical to recognize your language age, gender, culture, education level, and that influence to your nutrition approach. Be humble, remain curious about others' experiences instead of making assumptions or building your lesson plans and recipes based on your knowledge or inaccurate stereotypes. Talk to the people who work and live in the community that you're working in. Talk to the students. Don't assume. And a reflection point that is always good before going into class is asking yourself, what questions should I ask about my audience before class so I get the information that I need? So I encourage you to reflect on that question. And then for specific nutrition topic ideas, there's just so many to choose from. I encourage, like I just said, to assess your audience's interests first. Ask them what they're interested in, learning more about them, or give them a list to choose from. Again, student choice is really important. In general, these topics are appropriate for school-age children. Talking about where foods grow and come from, how to read recipes, nutrition labels. Diving into those culinary skills is where you could have really fun hands-on learning, how to measure, different prep methods, food safety, mind-body connection to food. It's really a great one. It's stressful times right now, and food has a role in that too. Food impacts mood. It's not just about heart disease and high blood pressure. It affects the now. There are short-term effects of food too. And that's really approachable to kids because they only think about the short term. What foods give us energy so we could play on the soccer field for a whole game and not get so tired. Recognizing hunger and fullness cues through mindfulness, how to design your own recipe. Again, that encourages creativity, eating the rainbow, food marketing and nutrition myths. Kids love nutrition myths, and a point I really like to make, and this is more with like the middle school, high school audience, is the impact, like the food industry and how there's brilliant minds that are trying to control your consumer bias, and they're trying to manipulate you into purchasing their products. And they're very smart, but we have to, use our brains to figure out what they're trying to do and make informed decisions. And I just want to end on the point of, again, nutrition education isn't telling people what they should and shouldn't eat. It's about giving tools and resources so that the students can make informed decisions and facilitating conversations and connections to food and self-care. And here's just a list of resources I shared. I know you'll need to gather some nutrition facts regarding fruits and vegetables. So I listed some helpful websites and then just more tools to leading nutrition education, since we only have an hour in this class, and I could really talk for days and days, and I'm still learning too. And that brings us to our Q&A. So feel free to unmute or add in the chat any questions. We are here for you.
While folks are typing and thinking, I just want to say, first, of course, thank you again, and also just how brilliant each of your presentations were and spot on for the needs, of the work that we're doing with kids in schools. Want to quick highlight, Maris, your point about asking students what they don't like. I love that. That is such a cool inverse of the typical, like, what's your favorite vegetable or what's your favorite fruit? And I think would stimulate a ton of interesting conversation. and think about different interesting, just like ways to try things and have new experiences with food. Okay, I have one quick question, also just sort of off your last point, and I'm curious how all the panelists sort of think about this, which was that like short-term impact of food and how it makes us feel physically and like mentally, and like how we talk about that with kids and or adults, and also maybe just like you mentioned mindful eating and just like what that means and sort of how it might like come to life in each of your roles, whether it be, as a nutritionist or as a doctor or someone working with younger students. So just curious about like that mindful eating and how we talk about the short-term impacts of how food makes us feel.
That's a super great question. I could start since it was something I mentioned in my presentation. First of all, with mindfulness, I think that there's a misconception that it means, meditating with an apple for an hour. That's very exaggerated, but mindfulness takes it, there's many different approaches to it, and this goes back to my point of using 5 senses is a great mindfulness activity. Just having kids explore different elements of food. If you're doing a food demo, what color is it? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? What texture is it like? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? Just taking a pause to reflect and appreciate the food that's in front of you. And the short-term effects of food, yeah, with kids and audiences, or kids with adults, it's funny because the same points, I find that they're interested in the same points when it comes to like food and mood. And I just like to say that we're not superhumans. If we don't eat, our bodies are going to react. We need food to live. So if we're not fueling our bodies, if we're not giving them love and nourishment, our body's going to fight us back, and that's going to result in our brains not thinking clearly because our brains need food. We're going to feel tired and wiped out, and we might blame ourselves for that, when in actuality, it's just because we didn't receive food. It's not because it's a fault of just our genetic makeup.
Yeah, I think I mean, for a more adult population, I would just echo everything Maris said in the sense of being mindful in that mindful experiment. But something I sometimes talk with a little bit older populations, which may not be applicable to this group in their teachings, but maybe for themselves. We're all very busy, right? And I see constantly people eating lunch while doing work, right? Like, over top of their lunch, they're typing on their laptop, and then they're tired throughout the day and don't feel necessarily energized from that meal. They consumed the food, perhaps, but I think there's something about the act of mindful eating and disconnecting from technology or disconnecting from distractions and truly enjoying the food that you're consuming. Again, using those 5 senses. I feel as though taking that break, doing that, and then returning to your work or your studies or whatever it may be, you'll find that you're more energized or more motivated to continue that work and probably have a exponential benefit than if you try to push through, so to speak, working and or worse, more so if people, skip lunch to get more work done. That's something that you definitely will feel, I think, later in the day, more tired, etc. But even if you are eating, but maybe it's a quick snack or trying to like shovel things down while working, I think that's something that maybe hits more for a more adult population.
Right, guys, we actually have a
Yeah,
couple of
and
questions,
oh,
and I'm sorry, Ariel, I was going to get to some questions
no
in the
problem.
chat as well. We have a couple in the chat. I know we have a couple more minutes on this. I wanted to make sure that we get to some of these questions. Dan, I know you touched upon smoothies. It says, regarding smoothies, how necessary is it to add protein supplements to smoothies, especially for older students?
Yeah, great question. Thanks. So adding protein supplements can certainly adjust the flavor, right? There's some great chocolate flavored ones or vanilla flavored protein supplements that can definitely add they typically are loaded with kind of like a multivitamin situation going on there, but they also can be really expensive. And so that would be something, if it's something that the student is already kind of purchasing or has and is looking for that, maybe I think you'd have to talk a little bit more it through with the particular student. I think generally speaking, Americans get plenty of protein, so there's not really a lack of protein in our diet. But again, this could be individualized. If that's the primary protein source for that family or that student, that's a different question. So I think digging in a little bit is probably what you'd have to do, finding out about the needs or wants of that particular student. But I would say at the end of the day, it's not absolutely necessary. A smoothie would be great if it's just fruit. Smoothie would be great if it's a combination of fruits and vegetables. It's another one of those ways to potentially customize that smoothie. Now, if Maris or Ariel have any other insights into kind of the family dynamic or anything like that, happy to have you guys jump in on that.
Yeah, I guess the other point to make is when finding out what's accessible to the audience, like really digging into that. So look up the local grocery stores or corner stores. You don't want to recommend something that is unaffordable or inaccessible. So that should be first step one, is learning what is accessible. And there's nutrition, like when it comes to nutrition advice, there's so many different options to choose from, but it should be catered to who you're working with. So supplements may be an option for some people, but I know it's not for most.
Ariel, I don't want to cut you off. Are you going to jump in on that one?
No, you're all good. I think
Okay,
everything was
perfect,
said.
perfect.
Thank you.
I couldn't see you on the other one. Now I see your face. Gotcha. Cool. Guys, another question that we have in the chat is, what was your best moment / memory when teaching people about nutrition, when you really felt like your message got across?
I can see everyone thinking, but I'll jump in right now because I have a really recent one actually, and it was completely impromptu. I was walking through one of our cafes, and one of our cashiers stopped me and said, her two little kiddos are struggling with eating their veggies, and so I was just like, yeah, okay, nutrition 101, sort of like or like nutrition education crash course right now. So I said one thing that I've seen be successful. This is, just one strategy to potentially try, is getting the kids involved in the decision-making process of what vegetable are we going to eat tonight. So mom's still in control, right? She's deciding what the two options are, but then the kids get to decide between the two. And so then they have some decision-making or skin in the game, so to speak. And then I suggested that she allow them whatever's age appropriate for the kids to help in the kitchen as well. So the next week I come into the cafe again, and she stopped me and told me that it worked. The kids are so excited. They fight over who gets to pick the vegetable for the night, and then they are fighting over who gets to help cook. And so they're saying I picked today and the veggies great, and then the next one picked I picked today and the veggies great. And so mom was just like, it's a total win because I don't really care what vegetable they eat. They're just eating vegetables now. So that was a great, for me, an impromptu and a great nutrition kind of teaching moment.
I mentioned I've done a lot more nutrition learning in my time as a student than I have teaching. But one moment that I can think of is I was working on a farm and I was doing like food outreach programs, and I hosted this event that was kind of like about where food comes from. And I was working with this family, and we were like, pulling radishes and turnips out of the ground. And I just remember kind of like washing them off and like, serving them with a dollop of butter or whatever. And I just like remember this moment of like this little kid just being like, this thing was never exciting before. Like a radish is kind of a hard sell, totally. But as watching it kind of come out of the ground and where it came from and being part of that process, made this kid just so excited about the radish. And it was kind of really beautiful to see.
There are just so many to choose from. And it's funny, like initially I think about the moments where just every kid is so happy and laughing and we're all having fun together. I have a game where we pretend we're farmers and we're picking vegetables and we're talking about what vegetables we would pick and why it's good for our bodies. And it's just very silly and great. But I would say the most touching memories are when I get a difficult group or really quiet group. And with education, it's rapport building. We can't go into an environment and assume they'll trust us and they'll like us and they'll want to listen. So this group was very quiet, very shy, and it just took consistency. And one day they opened up and we had a really deep conversation about body image and the impacts of nutrition and body image and eating habits and life things, just hard life things as a teenager. And I'd say that was my most special moment because they were willing to share those hard thoughts and that vulnerability with me. And I was really honored.
Awesome. All right, guys, I have the $1 million question. I know dealing with kids, I recall growing up, it was a lot of pressure on making sure you're eating and drinking your sources of calcium, making sure you don't leave the dinner table before you finish your vegetables. Is there any truth to the myth that vegetables, if you don't eat all your vegetables, it will hurt your growth, it will hurt your development? Same things as far as drinking your milk and drinking orange juice and things of that nature that kids kind of feel like are punishments at tables sometimes. Is there truth to these myths that you have to drink your calcium, eat your vegetables, otherwise it will hurt or hinder your growth?
I think food should never be a punishment. That's not an effective tool. We don't want kids to fear food or feel guilt or shame. It's funny, like the diet industry does the same tactics and it never works. So I would say, like, when it comes to that approach of like using fear, it's just not a good educational tool. We should be talking about food as celebration. You know, people shouldn't eat vegetables because they're afraid of dying. They should eat vegetables because they like them. So I don't know if that
And they make you
directly
feel
answers
good.
your question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ariel, go ahead.
I 100% agree. I think the key is to find joy in food, and I think that that's proven like across the board to always be more effective. And even things about like, don't like say certain foods are, you know, don't remove certain foods. Emphasizing elimination is never helpful. Emphasizing adding and bringing more color and vibrancy into the foods that you're eating and making it kind of this exciting, beautiful community thing is always going to be more effective. In terms of like, you know, literally, is it going to affect your growth to not eat your vegetables? You know, vegetables, the reason we like them and recommend them is because they have a lot of amazing nutrients that you can't really get elsewhere. And all like kind of those different colors of all the different vegetables are different antioxidants and different vitamins and minerals that are in those foods. And so those are all essential for our highest functioning. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't agree with the punishing rhetoric. Does that answer your question a little bit? We can go more into it, but
No, absolutely, and I definitely wanted to tee that up. I'm not sure if that gets asked, but I know that's a lot of times is the question. Even Dan was mentioning in the question about he got stopped in the hallway, and the vegetables question came about. So no, thank you. Those are great answers. All right. I don't see any. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I wanted to touch on a little bit about what Jarrett was asking earlier, if we don't, because I don't see any more questions in the chat. Which is something that I learned that I found to be an extremely helpful tool. I think with adults mostly, but also with older kids, it's kind of asking them like what their goals are. What do they want? Like, what do they want to feel? And then you kind of being someone who's there to help them get to that. And that framing is it seems so obvious once you say it, but it's actually so not intuitive. And I feel like we're so used to like prescribing and like telling people what to do. But if you instead just ask like, what are your goals? Like, what do you want? Like, what are you feeling that you don't want to feel? Or and how can I help you with that? Always ends up being a much more effective and also more compassionate way of communicating with people. And so I would encourage you with the kids that you're working with to like Maurice was saying earlier, like ask them questions, learn about them and see what their needs are. And that'll make you a much more effective partner in meeting and helping them with whatever those needs are. Yeah, that was my little 2 cents.
Awesome. All right, guys, we're coming right upon 11 a.m. I know sometimes it's tough to think of questions on the spot, and they may come about after we end this meeting. Jared has everyone's email address and contact information. So if any other questions pop up after we end this session, please reach out to us directly. You can reach out to myself, but I'm sure Dan, Maris, and Ariel will share their contacts as well. And if anything comes up, and we're here as partners, we're here as support. So if there's anything that we can help you, assist you with, partner with you with on anything of these projects, we're more than happy to do it. And we really appreciate the relationship with Jared and the entire team at the Netter Center. So thank you all for that.
Y'all brought the sunshine. Thank you so much.
It was so fun. Thank you. I added my email in the chat, but happy to email it out to you.
Absolutely. I see everyone putting their email in the chat. So thank you, Dan. Thank you, Maris. Thank you, Ariella, for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jared, for putting this together with myself. And thank you all. Please reach out to us if we have any other questions, and we look forward to maybe doing this again another time.
Thanks, Jabbar.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
you all.
Dan. Thanks, Maris. Thanks, Ariella. This was amazing.
Thank you guys for organizing. This was awesome.